Hey, are you looking to scale your business from figures to six figures or six figures to seven figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
Olson, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You have something very important to share with us today. And like I told you before we started recording, I want to kind of let you go with the flow because you know your material and the information and how to present it. So take it away.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to. And please feel free to, if I'm saying anything that doesn't make sense or needs clarifying, please jump in. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so I am a forensic nurse, and a lot of people have no idea what that is. So I'll start there. But there are specialized nurses around the world, and we're trained to take care of victims of crime. So my specialty is taking care of kids who have experienced sexual assault, which of course can be a very difficult job, but it's also such an honor to be able to support victims and families in a crisis. So I've been doing that for almost 10 years, and very quickly into my sort of experience of being a sexual assault nurse examiner, I realized we were seeing kids who were actually being trafficked, but we're calling it something else, where this is a juvenile delinquent, this is a runaway, this is someone who's experienced sexual assault, when in fact there was a level of exploitation going on. I had never had training on human trafficking as a forensic nurse, which is wild. 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about this. And so really the catalyst for me was I had a patient who I'll never forget, and it was just an absolute disaster. We had no protocol at our hospital, no policy. No one knew what to do. This patient was not disclosing and was extremely triggered being in the hospital. And so she was very angry in that fight or flight response. And I didn't have the tools. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle the situation. And basically every place I tried to report my concerns to threw up their hands and said, not my problem. And this is a kid, this was a minor. And really no one knew what to do. No one wanted to work together. I mean, it felt like a failure on so many levels. And so I walked away from that experience feeling so demoralized and just thinking, I don't want another kid to come through our doors where we're all throwing our hands up and looking at each other like, not my problem. And so what I found as I started to do research and reach out to survivors and other programs and experts in this field is I realized we're seeing these kids all the time. And it's not just kids, adults as well, who are coming in, who are being trafficked, who are being exploited. They're coming into healthcare settings and we're missing them. Almost every single time we're missing this. And so for healthcare workers, it's an incredible opportunity to be not only recognize and provide resources and to provide safety for a really vulnerable person, but it's the right thing to do, for us to really be on the forefront of this. So I implemented a screening tool into the emergency department I was working in about 5 years ago. And what we found is if we ask kids the right questions the right way, our disclosure started to skyrocket. So we were identifying over 100 kids every year that were coming in where we had concerns that were saying, yes, there's some type of exploitation or trafficking happening. And we had no idea that it would be that huge. So I started my own business a couple of years ago, really to say, hey, if this works in one ER, I can guarantee it will work in any setting if we do this right. And so that's what I've been working on, is not only bringing awareness and training healthcare workers, but here are the actual tools you need. It's not enough to just know what is trafficking. You need to know, how do you talk to patients? How do you help them feel safe? How do you calm them down? What resources exist? How do we screen? Just things that we've never taught healthcare workers. So I've been on a mission to do that the last 2 years. And I just had a really encouraging conversation with a hospital in Alberta, Canada, where we implemented this screening program last year, and 71% of the kids that they screened positive for some type of exploitation or trafficking, or if there were risk factors there, which is huge. And this was not a big place in Alberta. This was a smaller city. And so it just, again, feels like if they're identifying it there, it's happening everywhere. We just have such a massive lack of awareness around this issue. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about. I want healthcare workers to have this information. But for a lot of hospitals, this is not a priority. So that's been a big barrier, is helping them see this is actually really important, and we can equip your staff with being able to do this well.
So this is, I found it really fascinating that you identified a way to identify the victims. And really, I think it was just brilliant that, okay, where are they going on a regular basis? And the great thing about, a medical clinical setting is that they are going there for some sort of treatment or exam, and these kinds of questions will make sense that will pull out, to identify them. I'm wondering, are there other I don't want to say businesses, but are there other facilities that are similar to that could benefit from that same awareness?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. So there are lots of professions that are intersecting with this population that, just like healthcare workers, don't realize that they are. And I think that's part of the problem, is healthcare workers think trafficking looks like the movies, right? They think someone's being abducted off the streets and sold into a sex trafficking ring, and it almost never looks like that. Like, we interact with trafficking victims all the time. It's hidden in plain sight. We have the incorrect perception if we don't know what to look for. So, of course, drug treatment facilities, right? Detox. I mean, they're seeing this population constantly. Homeless shelters. Anyone working with a vulnerable population probably is intersecting with people who are being exploited at some point. So if we think about even undocumented populations, of course, they're vulnerable. I'm trying to think. So social workers, teachers, law enforcement, advocacy groups, all of them need this type of training, and really the tools to understand, what are we looking at? How do we help them feel safe and provide resources?
Anywhere where there are mandated reporters, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes.
Now, in the nursing realm, did you have to figure out all of this on your own and figure out what to look for and how to identify and how to interact with people?
Yes, for the most part, unfortunately, right? So I think that for sure. So if I rewind back to nursing school, I graduated 15 years ago. The word trauma, like if we're talking about emotional trauma, was never mentioned once. And if you think about being a patient, like everything about being at a hospital is traumatic usually. It's something bad has happened to you, or you're getting a hard diagnosis, or someone's dying. Like everything about it is hard. It can be so traumatic. And yet we do not teach our healthcare workers, how do you interact with someone when they are experiencing something difficult, which is just mind-blowing. So yes, for me, it was a lot of, okay, what do we look for with human trafficking? And thankfully, there are some incredible researchers who kind of laid the groundwork for me that I built off of. And there's an incredible physician, Jordan Greenbaum, who she created the first screening tool around this. And then we've built off of it. So other people kind of helped me put this together. But really, for me, it was, yes, having to go down this rabbit hole of what exists, doing literature reviews, talking to other people and putting it together, and then talking to survivors and saying, what would have helped you feel safe when you were in a healthcare setting and you got missed? Like, what did you need? And I think what a lot of it boils down to is helping people feel seen and valued, really at the core of it. Like if you can sit and take your time and build rapport, that's of course when you start to get the disclosures and the red flags. But so much of healthcare is like we're checking boxes and we're hurrying and it's about throughput. We have to get this patient in and this one out and check all the boxes and blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing ever built in for slowing down. And like, this is a person in front of me. I want them to feel seen. Every time we can slow down and have that connection, it makes all the difference in the world in a patient's experience, but also in their trust of us. And so for me, I think that's been a huge shift, is when I can really bring that to a patient of, I see you, I care about you, you have my attention. You can just feel the like anxiety come down. I was in an emergency department a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, I had this like sinus infection from hell and my eardrum ruptured. But my experience in the emergency department as a patient was the exact opposite of what I'm teaching, you know, and that help people feel safe and seen. It was, I could feel the annoyance of the ER staff, right? Of like, we're so annoyed that we're so busy. Hurry up, you know, eyes rolling, frustration, lack of patience, you know, with the different people in the waiting room. And so I think there's just innately the way our healthcare systems are set up, it does not support really what victims need. And so that's really what I'm teaching a lot of times is how do we create that environment so there is that felt safety.
Yeah, so this got me thinking. I have worked for in the past for many years as a high school, middle school teacher. Before that, I worked with the developmentally disabled population and also spent some time with undocumented. Not once in any of my training was there anything related to emotions, emotional connection, or I mean, you name it, anything emotional, completely not a part of the picture.
Wow.
And that just blows me away to think about that.
That is such a missed opportunity because all of those populations, you know, have unique things happening with them.
Yeah. There are opportunities that on several different levels that are just being completely missed.
Yeah.
Because all we care about is the scientific aspect or the data-driven aspects of it.
Exactly. Yes, agreed.
So what has it been like? Let's talk a little bit about the business end of things, the training that you're providing. So you saw there was a need, probably dawned on you one day, like, wow, somebody needs to do something.
Yes.
And so you started developing materials. What did that look like? Was it like material, or let's talk about what you have now. Are there materials that people go through? Is it video training? Do you go in person to train? How does that work?
Yeah, so my preference is to go in person to train because I just feel like there's so much value when you can attune to other people and kind of read the energy in the room. And we're talking about really hard things, you know? So I think to kind of dump this whole load of like really traumatic information on people, but not be there in person to kind of help them navigate it. To me, I feel like I'm doing a disservice. So my preference is to go in person, but that's not always possible. So I do online training sometimes, kind of depending on the topic. So that's one piece of it, is I want staff to have at least 8 hours of training of this because they really need to understand the neurobiology of trauma, like what's happening in someone's brain. Why are our patients flipping out? Why do they want to leave? Like what is going on sort of from that scientific level, but then moving it over to the emotional level of how do we get their brain back online so they can engage with us. And that's going to apply to literally every single patient, but very much this population. So going through, you know, kind of multiple facets of what the skills and the tools they actually need to be able to make a difference with this specific population. And then a lot of times if they're interested in implementing screening, then I'll work with them for several weeks to months, kind of however long it takes to give them my screening tool. And then let's talk about from A to Z, what does this look like? Who's doing it? Who are you screening? What does that look like? Do we need to do extra training for the screeners? how are you reporting, right? So thinking through all the nuances of that, because I have implemented it in several different locations. I have a good idea of the barriers and kind of, trial and error. So that's something else that I will offer as well. And then if they need other tools, I'm willing to work in the moment. So I've had places say, can you create card that has signs and symptoms that we give to all of our labor and delivery nurses? Or can you create a special training for this? Or, I had one time I screened an actual survivor and we recorded that and then gave that to staff so they could watch me ask her questions and her respond. And they could watch it as many times as they needed to really feel comfortable before they did it. So I'm very flexible in terms of, because I know each healthcare system is unique, and the population that they're serving, it's going to look really different in Alaska versus here in the Midwest in Kansas City. So I, beyond the basics of we do in-depth training, we figure out what screen looks like, then I'm willing to create materials that are unique to what that healthcare setting needs, and that has worked really well so far.
How responsive have you found these places to be when you reach out to them about this training?
That has probably been the hardest part of being a business owner, is the amount of no's that I've gotten. And, I went from working in the corporate hospital world to owning a business, which was such a huge learning curve. I mean, I didn't know anything in terms of how do you sell a product and how do you just asking so many people for help of what do I do, which, I've learned a ton in the last 2 years, but I'm passionate about this, obviously, and I'm always floored when other people, hear a spiel, or I'll tell them a real story about a survivor who was identified or whatever, may be, and they're kind of yeah, no, we're not interested. And I think so I get told no more than I get told yes, but I think the biggest barriers are hospitals. The bottom line is they want to make a revenue. And I think for them, if they cannot see how this is going to generate a revenue, they're not interested in investing time or resources into it. And so we can say, yes, there is actually a revenue in terms of if we can identify victims and prevent this cycle from happening over and over and over, they're going to stop using your ER as their primary care physician eventually, right? But it's hard to say that's going to equal this much money for you. It's kind of in theory, this is a preventative sort of thing. And so I think a lot of times they're yeah, that's just not what we want to invest our money, our resources, our staff in. And so what I have found has worked the best is if I can find a champion, if I can find another forensic nurse or a physician or someone who they get it, they're I will push this for you. That is where I've gotten my foot in the door, is them saying, we're not going to take no for an answer, and we are bringing Heidi in. Now, what's that going to look like? So I had the head of security at a hospital in New York do that for me, which was amazing. Or I had a forensic nurse in Alaska, same forensic nurse in Canada. So having those champions is really how I've got my foot in the door. But if I just called the hospital and was hey, you need this, they'd be yeah, no.
Yeah.
So that's been challenging.
Yeah. So I would imagine that you're right. It's one, they're a business. It's funny. It took me years to realize that hospitals were businesses.
Yes.
I just assumed they were somehow not. And
right.
Yeah, that was kind of a dumb moment. But I would imagine that they also have, we see the value in this, and it's very important. But do they have other equally important to them initiatives that they need to implement? And then on top of that, the time that it takes their staff, and oh man,
yep.
I can see where they'd be hesitant unless, like you said, there was a champion.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding that person?
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus? What I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
Yeah, so that's also been really interesting. A lot of it, honestly, has just been sort of these word of mouth, organic kind of relationship. So it'll be people that maybe have seen me present over here and are like, hey, that was incredible. We're bringing you to our hospital over here. Or, yeah, just recommendations from people who said, hey, I saw you posting on LinkedIn about this and this and this. You're the only one I've seen talking about this. Could we meet? So it's been, yeah, kind of interesting. There hasn't just been one funnel point. It's been a lot of times referrals from other people who are like, hey, she's doing a great job. You know, I'd reach out to her. Yeah, I would say most of the bigger hospitals I've trained, it's been someone who's kind of been trusted to talk to the champion, and then I've gotten my foot in that way. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think so. Do you do this full time now? Is Paradigm Shift your full time work?
It is my full time, yes. So that's been really exciting. I've also been consulting as well, you know, as I've been trying to figure out what all of this looks like, you know, getting in with hospitals is I'm actually working with a Medicaid group, and we have been doing little conferences as well to raise awareness about human trafficking. So I've been doing other kind of little projects on the side that have also opened doors for my business as well, which has been great. But yes, this is what I'm doing with full time, which has really been kind of amazing to step out of the hospital setting and do something different.
And to focus, you know, 100% on this. What are some of the other, you know, you talked about, you know, the side things that you do, but really they're still related and part of the whole. What other opportunities have you seen that you'd like to pursue and include under the umbrella?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So something that where a lot of doors have been opening lately is in terms of research. So there's just such a lack of research around all things related to, especially human trafficking, healthcare setting, especially with kids. And so I've had several talks with several different partners about, you know, collecting data, different studies that we could do. And even with the screening tool that I've been kind of editing and perfecting over the last year, you know, thinking it through, collecting data with each hospital that is, you know, keeping the data from each hospital that is, you know, screening to say, publish and say over time, like, this really works. Here are all the positive results, you know, we've gotten over a 5-year period or whatever it may be, if that makes sense. So I think research is another important road to go down, and that I have a unique opportunity to do that, especially as I'm making connections.
Is there a way, I'm just going back to the getting them interested.
Yeah.
Is there a way to provide like a laminated sheet that gives them just like a freebie or a very inexpensive, something that the hospital or clinic can buy that people can look at and at least start looking for a few of those indicators?
Yeah, yes, I'm actually in the process of creating something similar to that, because I had some nurses reach out to me from kind of a rural community and just said, we just need a tool like that, you know, that we can have at the, you know, nurses station. And I was like, that's a great idea. And I'm going to go train them in October. So my thought is kind of to create that and be able to bring it with me. But yes, I think that's an excellent idea to start to kind of provide other tools, you know, outside of training.
Yeah. So, you know, I could see that you've got that, and then you've got some of your, you know, your free training just to get people to start seeing results.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
To kind of prove that there's a need.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Because, yeah, that's probably the biggest benefit of doing that, is it just starts getting them more aware, and some of those people will want the training down the road.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is a barrier as well, right? Because we have a lot of business people making the executive decisions at a hospital. They are not patient facing. They're not in the ER taking care of patients like we are, you know? So it's like, they don't understand, you know, what it looks like when a trafficking victim comes in, because that's not their role. So when I'm saying trafficking, they're thinking of a movie like Taken, and they're like, no, you guys are not seeing a bunch of patients like that. All right. So I think there's even that disconnect. Whereas if we can start to show, yes, we absolutely identified this on labor and delivery, or, you know, behavioral health unit, this is what it looked like. Then it starts to become clear of like, oh, we are seeing this and we are missing this.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at your website right now. You have a lot of good articles on there. Um, what have you seen the response to that, to your content marketing? What's been the response?
Yeah, so it's been encouraging for the most part. You know, I think people are interested in what frontline workers see, and I think a lot of people are interested in this topic in particular. And so, yes, I feel like whenever I've published things or posted, you know, different blogs or content, I usually do have people reaching out that want to know more, which has been really helpful. Kind of a caveat, but it is related in some ways, is where we see a lot of trafficking, especially with kids, happening is online. Right? So for traffickers, it's really easy to make contact through, you know, Snapchat or Discord or whatever. They're on all the apps that kids are on, pretending to be same-aged peers. And that's how they're getting their foot in the door, much more than like, you know, abduction and things like that. So I think it also helps to be able to share those frontline, like, here's what we actually are seeing with kids in real time. But I've also done a ton of research around sort of online safety, kids' exposure to pornography, the trends we're seeing with that, and how it's playing a role with exploitation and abuse and things like that. So I have a ton of content on my website around that as well, because that's another area that I feel passionate about that does intersect with the sort of world of exploitation as well. So you'll see that.
Now, I was watching one of your videos where you're talking about the average age of the perpetrators being
Yes.
11 to 15.
Correct. That's still true.
Could you, explain to me now, what do you mean by perpetrators? Because
Yeah.
in this world, you've got different.
Yes. So I'll back up and say, when we're talking about human trafficking, we're talking about an exchange that happens, right? So it's someone being sexually abused in exchange for money or something of value. But when we're talking about sexual assault, there's not that commercial exchange, right? So it's someone being sexually harmed, but they're not given anything in return for it. So of course, there's a lot of crossover in those worlds. So as a forensic nurse, when we see kids come in that say they've experienced sexual assault, sometimes there is in fact trafficking happening, right? There was an exchange that happened. But the majority of kids who come in and say they've been sexually assaulted, it's a sexual assault. And so we write down the age of who harmed them, who was the person perpetrating this. And I think I always thought it was going to be these like adults, males, you know, who lived in a basement, who are luring kids down there with candy or whatever the stereotype is. And what I realized very early on is that a ton of our perpetrators, so those sexually harming our patients, were kids themselves. And that trend has continued for the last 7 years. The age range that makes up the majority, like if we break down each age range, the age range that has the most perpetrators in it are 11 to 15-year-old males. And that blew my mind the first time that I saw that. I was like, what is happening? Like, is this just a Kansas City thing? Is this like, what is this? So I'm sure you can tell. It's like when I have a question, I'm going down the research rabbit hole because I have to understand why this is happening and how do we fix it. And so same thing is, it's not just happening in the Midwest. There was actually a research study published in the UK this year saying the majority, over 50% of their perpetrators are kids. Australia published the same thing, this 2024 study. They're seeing the same thing in Canada. It's all across the United States. The stats are very similar. And what we're seeing is just, there's a huge correlation between kids being exposed to pornography at really early ages on their devices, and they're acting out what they're seeing. And parents have such a lack of awareness. So it's like, sure, we'll give my kid a device, and like, what could possibly go wrong? And they have no awareness that any kid that has a device, if there are not filters in place or awareness, they're 2 clicks away from porn at any given time. And so kids imitate what they see. If they're watching violent porn, which most porn today is very violent, unfortunately they're acting it out on other children and peers. So that's a massive epidemic that is just skyrocketing around the world that hardly anyone is talking about. And it correlates with the trafficking issue, because what we see is a lot of kids are seeing a lot of porn and being desensitized, and no one's talking to them about it. People online ask them for nude photos and pictures, and they're desensitized. So they're like, oh yeah, this stranger asked me for this. Okay, no problem. And then that stranger online is like, I'll send money to your Cash App if you keep sending me more content. I'll give you a gift card, whatever it may be. So now we have an exchange taking place, right? Kid is sending a nude photo or whatever, which is child sexual abuse material or child pornography. Of course, they don't realize that in exchange for something. Now we're actually talking about trafficking. We're talking about exploitation here. Yeah. And that kid doesn't think that there's anything wrong, right? I've been so desensitized. Here I'm making money. It's, my choice or whatever. No, you're a child who's being exploited by an adult online. And so we're seeing huge trends around that where, again, a lot of parents have no idea that's going on. And we have kids who are being harmed online in that regard. And so this all kind of ties together, as depressing as it all is.
Yeah, man. When I was 11, I was still watching Saturday morning cartoons.
Right, exactly.
Things.
Yes, it's a totally different world.
Dang. So what are you able to do on that account? Do you work on helping educate parents, for example?
I do, yeah. So I always have a section in my presentations about that because I just think it's so incredibly important for there to be awareness around that. But I also believe healthcare workers play a pivotal role, that they should be screening for that as well. Like, yes, we should be asking questions around trafficking. We need to be asking about online safety, exploitation, porn exposure, because we can't expect a 9 or 10-year-old to know how to navigate all of this online stuff by themselves. They can't. So I'm actually working with a group called Culture Reframed. I'm a consultant for them. And we're in sort of the final round of creating materials for healthcare workers and child advocacy centers and law enforcement that is all around, why do we care about porn exposure with kids that we're interacting with? What questions do we ask? What resources exist? What kind of, referrals do we need to make as healthcare professionals if a kid is struggling, with problematic sexual behavior? And so, yeah, I absolutely feel very passionate about it. So I'm working on those materials. And then, yes, anytime I get a chance to present to parents, community, healthcare workers, I do a lot of education on that because there's just such a big intersection.
So the people who are listening to this and reading the article, where can they start? What can they do to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So several things come to mind. If you are interested in in more information about any of these topics, please feel free to email me. My email is on my website. I am happy to have a dialogue, see how I can help or connect. And I am all about connecting people to the right resources. So I'm not a gatekeeper of like, it's my business or it's the highway, right? If it's like, hey, there's actually someone who's a better fit for what you're wanting to learn about or whatever, here's a referral, I want to work well with my colleagues. But also if you are a healthcare worker or you have contact with a healthcare worker and you're like, they could so benefit from this education, please connect me with them. Because like I said, that's really what has made, opened the doors for me as having sort of a person who's willing to step in and say, hey, we actually need this education. So if there's anyone in a position like that, I would love to hear from you. And then, yeah, I think even just in general, going to websites like Culture Reframed or Common Sense Media, like for anyone here, if you're a parent and you have kids with devices, it's so important to understand what they are being exposed to. It is beyond your wildest dreams of what is happening online. And there are ways to protect kids, but we have to be aware. So I would say even going to websites like that and just starting to familiarize yourself with pros and cons of different apps and ways to have hard conversations and make them less intimidating.
And what were those two websites again?
So the first one is called Culture Reframed, and the second one is Common Sense Media.
Common Sense Media, good. Wanted to make sure people are listening got to hear it a second time.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll have those links in the article and show notes. But then your website, paradigmshifttc.com.
Yes.
Definitely recommend people go there to learn more. Where would you like people to start when they go to your website? Do you want them to go directly to the forensic files and start getting an idea of kind of what's going on? What do you recommend for people?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two routes you could take. So if you're not a healthcare worker, I do think going to the forensic file part and just starting to read through the issue and really getting a sense of what's happening on the front lines. And then it's very different than kind of the movies, the way it portrays exploitation and trafficking.
Yeah.
But if you are a healthcare worker, I think even just looking at that front page and kind of understanding why screening is important and how effective it can be, and kind of thinking through, would this be a good fit for where I'm working?
Perfect. Is there anything more you'd like to add?
I think just something that's been on my mind so much since I was telling you, my ER experience a few weeks ago, is I know healthcare is in a really difficult state right now. We've had so many healthcare workers leave the last few years. Everyone is burned out. They're exhausted. I get it. Like, I have a lot of empathy for people who are, especially in a hospital setting right now, where it's just really, really challenging. But I think that the reality is that we all signed up to do no harm and to help people. And I think when we are just going through the motions and checking boxes in this very robotic way and not seeing the person in front of us, we do harm. Like, we miss the red flags. We miss the people who are asking for help. And so I think even just doing a training where it's like you get a renewed passion and sense of, oh yeah, I need to think about my body language. I need to think about what my face is doing when this person is telling this to me. I need to think through, how do I respond in a way to someone that empowers them instead of shuts them down? And I think as healthcare workers, we just either don't get that education, or we're so burned out right now, it's not on the forefront of our mind. And so I would say, just even to encourage, healthcare workers on this, that to have that education around how do we truly bring healing, physically and emotional healing, to our patients. Like, it's a big deal. It's an honor to do that. And we can do it. We just need to have, I think that the education around it, and I think the excitement around that. And I think that's missing in a lot of places right now.
Definitely. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. And other than your website and those two other websites that you mentioned, is there anywhere you'd like people to go to learn more about you and what you offer?
Yeah, so really the only social media that I have is on LinkedIn. It's under my name, Heidi Olson. And I will post kind of various case studies, stories, different things that I'm working on, places I'm traveling. So that's been a really fun place for me to connect with people. So feel free to follow me, connect. I despise social media otherwise, mostly just because of the work I'm doing, and I see how destructive it is. I just try and stay away, but I know it's a necessary evil for marketing. So LinkedIn is where I'm currently at, and I would love to connect with you all.
Excellent. Thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best, and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear